Hi, I'm Timothy Batten, and you're watching Welcome Home Doggy, where we talk about creating a better quality of life for all dogs. Joining us on today's episode is Elizabeth Oreck, the National Manager for the Puppy Mill Initiatives for the Best Friends Animal Society. Stay tuned, and we'll be right back.
We'll be there for you when you need a friend. We'll be there for you. We'll be there for you when you need a friend. We'll be there for you.
Elizabeth, hi. How are you today?
Hi, I'm very well. Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here.
We're very glad that you're here today to talk about something that is very near and dear to our hearts as far as like tackling this problem. So let's just jump right in about kind of what we're dealing with, because I think most people that are watching the show probably have an idea of what a puppy mill is. But could you just give us a rundown on what we're really talking about and kind of help us understand for the people that are watching, like why this is such a big issue and that is such a big problem. It's your complete focus. It's what it sounds like.
Yes, well, a puppy mill is a commercial breeding operation where profit takes priority over the health, comfort, and welfare of the dogs. And these places are in business primarily to supply the retail pet trade. So whether that's pet stores or online puppy stores, or sometimes selling directly to the public, although not generally face-to-face, but shipping animals across country. And the reason they're such a big problem is because even though they're regulated, and they're regulated primarily by the US Department of Agriculture, the minimum animal care standards that are in the Animal Welfare Act, which is the federal law created in 1966 to regulate these places, are just woefully minimal. And so dogs are suffering just in ways that I think people would be very surprised if they saw them in person. And that's also that those cute puppies can end up in the pet store window.
Sure. Now, as far as like the kind of conditions that we're talking about and why they're so bad, could you give us like some insight or a little bit of view so that people do have somewhat of a visual kind of to talk about, like, this is why this is so bad. These are the conditions they're put through. As we did have somebody on the show recently who had a puppy mill dog that she had rescued, and it was very like just heartbreaking because the dog was missing part of its jaw and had like all kind of different tumors because she had been bred so much to churn out this profit, and you could see it, and it was just heartbreaking. So could you tell us like what kind of conditions you guys are trying to change?
Yeah, and that's the point right there, is that it's not the puppies that are in the pet stores that we're as worried about, because they've gotten out and they're the ones who aren't at risk. It's the parents of those dogs that are in the mills that people don't see when they're buying that dog,
Right.
and they're not necessarily making that connection. And those are the dogs, particularly the females, that are forced to live in cages that legally only need to be 6 inches larger than the dogs themselves. And this is nose to base of tail. This isn't even the full length of the tail. And that's the cage with wire bottom flooring so that, any feces just drops down into the cage of the dog below. Those are the cages that those dogs live in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, often for years, because there's no requirement that they ever even be taken out of those cages for a second to stand on solid ground, to be in the sun, to do the things that we think about doing with our own dogs. They're just breeding and breeding and breeding in order to produce as many puppies as possible. And because the public doesn't see the parents, you see a lot of things like that, broken jaws. As long as they can still breed, it doesn't matter if they're happy, if they're comfortable, if they're socialized, if they're living in their own filth, that doesn't matter. All that matters to those breeders is that they can still produce puppies. And so that's the big problem, is that there are hundreds of thousands of dogs living in those kinds of conditions, and they're just there to churn out puppies as long as they're able. And when they're no longer able, then they're destroyed. They're either, at best surrendered to shelters, which is not great, but at worst, they're just, shot or sold at auction or disposed of because they're not useful anymore.
Right. That's those are some staggering numbers to hear. Like there's hundreds of thousands of pets being used in this way. Actually, I guess we couldn't even call them pets just because they're used for
They're
profit.
not.
It's
Yeah.
really not a pet, unfortunately.
No, they're an
Uh,
agricultural product, and that's why they're
Basically, yes,
regulated by the USDA, the same people who regulate cows and dairy farms and
sure.
the cattle industry and all of that. And there's no limit to how many dogs a breeder can have. So a breeder can have 1,000 dogs in one facility with only 2 people to, care for them.
Sure.
And so some of these places literally will have over 1,000 dogs.
That's insane. How many puppy mills generally, like roughly, are there in the United States that we know of?
So that's the tricky question, because
Yes.
technically to sell to a pet store, to sell through the commercial industry, they're supposed to be licensed by the USDA. So we know how many have licenses, and that's a few thousand, but there are also a lot of unlicensed, unregulated, uninspected puppy mills, as well as backyard breeders who are just breeding kind of willy-nilly in order to sell on Craigslist or Facebook. And so we could be talking thousands and thousands.
Sure.
And even the ones that are licensed, and you'll hear pet stores often say, oh, we don't use puppy mills, we only use USDA licensed breeders, but that's really just the same thing, because the care standards are so minimal and there's so few inspectors and so few inspections. And on top of that, the inspectors are not citing breeders anymore for serious violations. They're implementing a policy they call teachable moments, where they just give a verbal correction, but it's not noted. So it's not on the paperwork, it's not in the inspection report. And when you're talking about a little over 100 inspectors for about 12,000 licensees, because remember, they don't just inspect commercial dog breeders, they also inspect research animal facilities and zoos and aquariums and all of those kinds of things. Some of these inspections only happen, every few years, because they're risk-based is how they refer to them.
Now, what kind of, because that I didn't know. I didn't know they were regulated to the USDA, which is kind of strange, I would think. Is there a movement to kind of change that kind of regulation to make it to where there's more resources or like better legislation to like, because that treatment just sounds insane, and the fact that it just seems so unregulated, even though it's regulated, it just doesn't seem like,
Yeah.
straight honestly, it doesn't sound like it would be even legal to have like a 6-inch space around a dog and like just breed it to death. Basically, it doesn't seem like that would be something that would be okay.
You wouldn't think so. And what's more amazing is that anybody is ever not in compliance, because with the standards being so minimal, you'd think, well, how can they not even comply with those? And yet before they started the teachable moments policy, they were citing for some very serious violations, people having dead animals and people having broken jaws, untreated veterinary problems, all of that. And those were public inspection reports. And when the public started pushing back on that, and the animal welfare community was pushing back on that, that's when they became teachable moments, so there wouldn't be a paper trail. So every year there's a federal law introduced, or federal bill introduced, to try and improve the standards of care. Right now it's the Puppy Protection Act. It has over 100 co-sponsors. It's a bipartisan bill. These bills always get stuck in the agriculture committee and never get out. But every year we try and push them through and do what we can to try and make that change on the federal level. But what we find is that when you get to the state level and then you get to the local level, that's where it tends to be easier to implement change, because you can focus more strategically and more locally. And that's why the humane pet sales bills have gained such momentum. And these are local ordinances or statewide laws that prohibit pet stores from selling dogs and cats and sometimes rabbits, but allowing them to work with rescue groups and shelters to showcase homeless animals for adoption.
Gotcha.
And that has just taken on incredible momentum. And there have been over 400 of these laws passed in cities, counties, and 5 states. So I think that's where we're really going to see the change, because if we can shrink the market for those pets to be sold, then puppy mills will have nowhere to sell. And if we can get the public to change their consumer choices and start adopting rather than buying, or at the very least buying from truly responsible local breeders instead of these large scale puppy mills, then we will start to see the puppy mill industry die off even faster than it already is.
So that sounds like that's your move then, as part of this puppy mill initiative, is to focus more locally so that we're changing it on this smaller level, and then that will take hold nationally versus trying to make it national and going smaller.
Right.
Is that really like the mission behind what
Well,
the Best Friends Group is doing?
it's the most viable mission. I mean,
Got it.
people always say, why don't you just close down all the puppy mills? Well, it's legal. These puppy
Right.
mills are legal. And so we can't just shut them down. Sometimes they get shut down, rarely, but sometimes. But really, what the whole solution to the puppy mill problem is in the public's hands. If
Yeah.
they were not buying what people are selling through these mills, they would have no reason to keep producing these puppies, and the mills would just close up and be
Right.
behind us.
Nobody's buying, then it just goes away.
Like any product, right?
Right.
Puppies
We
aren't
don't buy
products, but
stagecoaches anymore.
exactly. And so what we're trying to do is really attack it from all angles, legislatively, educationally, through raising public awareness, through adoption programs, everything that we can to just shift the public consumer decision away from purchasing these puppies and more toward adoption, because we're still killing hundreds of thousands of dogs and cats in our nation's shelters every year. And Best Friends' mission is to end the killing of dogs and cats in our nation's shelters. And we can't do that as long as puppies are being mass produced in shelters and being produced in such a way that they often end up in the shelters because they become sick, they become afflicted with genetic problems because of the way that they're raised and the way that they're bred in these mills. And so they're ending up in the shelters and only adding to the problem. And it becomes a consumer protection problem as well, because people are spending a lot of money on these pet shop puppies.
Absolutely.
And then they're ending up with a dog that's costing thousands of dollars in vet bills, and sometimes they can't afford it, and the dog ends up in the shelter.
Yeah. So there's just problems from this from every angle, and you guys are attacking it at every angle.
Yes.
What are the things that we can do on these local levels and to help in the puppy mills from the Best Friends Animal Society's perspective? I mean, like education, letting people know, like, this is what you're buying, this is where this comes from, and how we
Right.
get that information to people the best possible way. Like, what are some of the things that we can do?
So you hit the nail right on the head in terms of the biggest thing you can do, which is to not support the puppy mill industry by choosing adoption if you're looking to bring a pet into your family, by sharing with your friends and your family and through social media what you know, because raising awareness is the biggest way to help people understand what's really happening, because we can't rely on the pet stores or on the online puppy stores to say, oh yeah, we're selling puppy mill puppies, but that's okay because they're cute, go ahead and buy one. They're not going to tell the truth because they're in it to make money, right? So we have to be the bearers of that information. So sharing what you know, but in a way that people will respond to, not public shaming that person who bought a puppy who didn't know, not making people feel bad, but helping them understand the reality and make better decisions by having as much information as possible. And then practically speaking, they can go to bestfriends.org/puppymills. They
Right.
can sign up to receive our action alerts so that when a piece of legislation like a humane pet sales ordinance or a bill to improve standards of care for animals in commercial breeding facilities comes up, they can easily contact their representatives and express their support. And there's a lot of really great resources and educational flyers that people can download. We tell you how to host a peaceful pet store rally, if that's something you want to do. And then we have this great new program where we have action teams across the country. And so you can either join or start a local action team in your community to try and make progress for animals, whether it's a puppy mill issue, or maybe you want to fight, breed specific legislation, or you want to help community cats or anything. Those are a really great way to get together with other advocates and make some real change.
Absolutely.
And we're here to help. We're always here to help at Best Friends.
It sounds like a great resource. So knowing people the way I know people, some people still want what they want. So
Sure.
if somebody is going to make that choice anyway, are there resources to help them make the most humane possible choice for that? Like Like, do you guys have a list of like, well, these are the ones that we think are okay, or like, even though they're licensed or whatever that situation is, because uh, people want what they want. Like some
Sure.
guys, like, I want that Doberman. I'm gonna get that Doberman, and he's
Right.
gonna go get that Doberman. So, are there resources to help people at least make the best possible choice?
There are. Best Friends doesn't vet breeders ourselves, so we can't recommend breeders directly. But what we do is provide what to look for when you are seeking out a responsible breeder and things to avoid. So what we recommend is to start with purebred rescue groups, of which there is one for every single breed of dog. So if you are looking for that Doberman, or you are looking for that, Rottweiler or Poodle or whatever it is, go to petfinder.com, which is not a Best Friends organization. That's their own organization, but they have a national database of every puppy, every adult dog, every type of dog, every age, looking for a home throughout the country. And you can do a specific search for that breed that you're looking for, and the age and the gender, and then see, because there may be, you may be able to rescue that purebred dog that you want. But if you don't find what you're looking for through a shelter or through a rescue group or through Pet Finder, then we just recommend that people really do their research and make sure, first and foremost, that they're not buying that dog from a breeder sight unseen. Don't rely on their website. Don't rely on the cute pictures of puppies curled up by the fire, because anyone can do that. Anyone can post
Sell
those
it well.
pictures.
They sell it very well.
They do. Of course they do. I mean, it's like
It is a
anything,
business.
right? It's a business. And so if you cannot go and visit the breeder's home yourself and see the conditions under which the puppies are raised and have a good conversation with that breeder, they should be interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. They should have a spay neuter contract. They should have an agreement that you can always bring back that dog. Those kinds of things are the things you'd want to look for.
Okay.
There are lots and lots and lots of responsible hobby breeders who are doing it right, who aren't doing it purely for profit, who are in every community across the country. You can find what you're looking for. But start with adoption, because there's a
Yeah,
lot
one
of
of the producers
wonderful
on the
dogs
show-
looking for homes.
Yeah, one of the producers on the show, he actually breeds champion Weimaraners, and that is one of the clauses in his contract, is that if this does not work out, that dog comes back to me. So I
Right,
can
so
rehome it
that's-
with an appropriate person. So
Yes, that's a
That-
responsible breeder, and that's what
Absolutely.
we want to see, and what we hope that people will know to look for when they're vetting those breeders.
absolutely. So what are the other things that we want to have in people's hands today when they're watching this interview? What other information do we really want them to know? Because yes, these conditions are bad. Yes, it's not very well regulated. And yes, there are lots of great options. Is there anything else, like the golden nugget, if you will, that we want to leave them with?
I mean, I would also say be wary of rescuing a puppy from a pet store. That's something that we hear a lot, that people feel bad. Those puppies are fine. Nothing's going to happen to those puppies. They will get sold.
Yes.
But when they get sold, that just makes space for another puppy mill puppy from a set of parents suffering in a mill to fill. And so please don't. And we know it's tough. So we just say,
Tough.
stay away from the pet stores. Stay away from those $10,000 golden doodles that the pet stores are selling with their predatory lending schemes. It's hard to resist.
It is.
That face
They're
in
so
the window.
cute.
That's why they put them in the window. And we get that. We get that animals are emotional, and that we love them too. That's why we're here. But we want to see fewer animals suffer and more animals find homes. So adopt whenever possible and spread the word. Those are the things that we recommend, because the more you know, the more you can share, and
Absolutely.
the closer we get to our ultimate goal of ending the killing of dogs and cats in our nation shelters by 2025.
That is a great mission, and we really appreciate having you on the show today. And that's some really great information, eye-opening. I want to thank Elizabeth for being part of the show today. I want to thank you for watching. For more information on today's guest and today's episode, please visit our website, subscribe to our channel, follow us on Instagram, and like us on Facebook. As always, thank you for joining us. I've been your host, Timothy Batten, and this has been Welcome Home Doggy.
See that cute little dog in the pet store window? Chances are it came from a puppy mill, a breeding facility that forces caged, neglected, and often sick dogs to churn out puppy after puppy to be sold for profit. That's how nearly all pet stores work. Meanwhile, millions of wonderful, healthy pets end up in animal shelters because of divorce, money trouble, or simply not having a home. But with one simple choice, you can help just by deciding to adopt instead of purchase your next pet. Animal shelters are full of amazing pets looking for a home. Mixed, pure breed, big or small, puppies to adults. You can find that faithful companion you've always wanted. A fluffy snuggler, your new hiking buddy, or even one that looks good in hats. When you adopt your new best friend, not only are you saving a life, you're taking a stand against puppy mills. Now imagine sharing the joy of adopting with your friends. Seeing the smart choice and impact you've made, they adopt their next pets and share with 5 of their friends who share with 5 more. Before long, thousands get involved. Pet stores stop selling dogs from puppy mills, and even more lives are saved. And all because you chose to adopt. Man's best friend deserves better. They deserve good care, safety, and love from a family of their own. And with your help, we can save them all. Visit bestfriends.org to learn more.